So I will be making this recorded. For those of you who have just joined in off a recorded version later on, welcome. I've just gotten started. All the materials basically they're jointly, the copyright is jointly owned by the presenter and MSPA. So the MSPA can use this information and these webinars as it sees fit, so can the presenters. In this case, this is me. And really, we'd appreciate that none of it is copied without authorization. We do want to keep this especially unique and private for the members, paying members of the MSPA. A little bit about myself. A lot of you know me already. Some of you don't. Like most people, I hate having my photo on a screen, but there I am. I'm the Executive Director of Service Integrity Mystery Shopping in Australia and New Zealand. I'm also a board member of MSPA Asia Pacific, past president, and I'm also a past vice president of MSPA Global. So I've got a bit of MSPA in my blood. So just a little bit of house rules here for the webinar. Everyone is on mute. You can hold up your hand, or you can ask questions. You'll see on your screen probably on the top right hand corner, you'll see a question mark. There's a little microphone which is to unmute you, and you can't unmute yourself. Everyone's on mute so that it's nice and crisp and clear in the background for everybody. Also, there's a question mark. So at the question mark, just feel free to ask any questions along the way. Okay, so the agenda. We're going to talk about the core features of a great questionnaire. And I think we all acknowledge that it really is the heart of our business. Bad questionnaire equals just bad all around for everybody. And the consequence of that is increased numbers of inquiries, unhappy clients. We know that's not a great place to be. If I'm talking too quickly, please someone just speak up and ask a question, or put it in the questions and tell me to slow down. I do get excited when I talk about mystery shopping, like a lot of you do. We're the only people in the world that do get excited, I know. In the original program, I said that there were 12 deadly questionnaire mistakes, and talking a little bit more about it with some other members, and also just having a bit more of a think about it, I think there are actually 17. Now, when I say 17, there are probably 77, but what we'll discuss today is 17, and we're going to go through them pretty quickly. Some of them are obvious, some of them might be new. Also, we're going to talk at the end about building good guidelines for shoppers. So I'm just going to flip this switch a minute, just check on my questions, just to make sure we haven't got any early on. So bear with me. Okay, we're all good. So I believe that I'm talking to a bunch of experts, and that makes it hard for me because I'd also like to think myself as a peer with everybody else. So all I'm doing here is collating what I've learned through the MSPA conferences, talking to other members, and basically getting all of that information together. Now, so I'm not going to teach you anything new, but maybe there's one hint, one message, or a question that you hadn't yet considered, or something that you hadn't thought of, which might spark something in your own mind. Also, feel free to disagree, and if there's something that I say that you disagree with, then that's fine as well. It's all good and it's all learning. The main idea here is to get everybody involved and sharing the message to improve the practices of mystery shopping around Asia Pacific. And we do have different countries. We've got people from all over AP, right from India up to North Asia, down to, well, I'm probably the person most south, down in Sydney in Australia, and across to New Zealand. So we've got people all over the region, and we've also got different levels. We've got founders of companies like myself who have been doing this for around 10 years, and we've got people who are new to mystery shopping. So we've got different levels. So some of the experts might say, yep, that's perfectly valid, and I get that. Someone might learn something new. So let's get into it. The questionnaires themselves, I think they've got some core features that we need to discuss before we look at the traps with questionnaires. So what are those core features of questionnaires? And I think the most important thing is that they should have a goal. And many of us would say this to our clients, but sometimes, and actually more often than not, we're hearing clients say, look, we just want to find out what the customer thinks, or we just want to find out what's going on, or The board said we have to do it. And that makes it very, very difficult for us. Usually there is something deep down in there that needs a bit more attention. And there is a real hidden need for the mystery shopping. And often they're just too embarrassed to even mention to you what that reason is. So it might be fraud. It might be they're worried about their training programs, but they're too proud to admit it because perhaps the person asking for the mystery shopping to be done in their company was the person who bought in that system that's not working so well. So we have to persevere and really dig in to find out what's going on and really what's going to change once the results are received. Because once we know that, and we all need that context to understand what's going on, once we know that, we can deliver something better to our clients. And for example, why are you collecting the data? Is it to get a broad grip of service, to improve your contact center service, for marketing, for fraud, for staff retention? Is it to measure staff key performance indicators? Is it to drive bonuses? And many of you would know if there's a bonus at the end of a mystery shopping program, it can make it tougher because people really fight for every single little point of the people in the stores. So we've got to be really clear on why they want to do this mystery shopping. So who is the mystery shopping aimed at is another question. Is it aimed at the senior managers to help them manage the business, the system? Is it aimed at the store staff? Is it aimed at regional managers to help them manage their area? That's an important question because it can drive the detail of what's to be reported and the optimum frequency of the mystery shops. So I'll talk a little bit about frequency a little bit later, but basically, if there is a tight budget and it's simply for senior managers to find out what's happening in their system, not to be store specific, then it's probably okay to have a lower frequency. But if they want to get down to store level trend reports, they really want to start looking at more frequent shops, e.g. monthly or twice monthly. So we need to understand who is going to be the reader and make sure that's consistent with their setup, e.g. example frequency. I think we have to acknowledge the art, and what we don't do in the mystery shopping business is acknowledge there's an art form to creating a good questionnaire, and many of you would know that. Not anyone can create a mystery shopping questionnaire. A lot of people think they can, but there is a real art to it, and we're going to dig into a bit more of that. Also, it has to be relevant. The questionnaire has to be relevant to what the client needs, what they said the aim was. And often I find, and a lot of practitioners find when I talk to them, is that the clients say, well, okay, great, I'm paying you, let's say, for example, $50 a shop, and now I want to fit in as many questions as I can to get my value for the dollar. And I can see some of you there nodding your heads saying, yep, that happens to me. It happens to us a lot. The problem is that the accuracy decreases, scope increases, and you stop making money because the queries increase. So we have to find out what's relevant, and are all these questions being asked relevant to the brief and to the aim of the program. Also, the program has to be dynamic. It has to move and keep changing, at the same time balancing trend reporting. So what we mean here is that, for example, we see often new studies where they might ask in a shopping centre, was the store signage clear? Or was there a sign at the front of the building? And the first mystery shop results might come back and say, yes, 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 in 99% of the cases. It's kind of a question that you don't need to ask every month. It's not a question that needs to appear all the time, but often it does appear. And it might be a question like, was the signage, a specific sign above a certain area present? Those things are static and won't change, and you can maybe do those the first time if necessary and later pull them out. But I wouldn't keep measuring the same thing that's there all the time that's never going to change. So I think we have to balance keeping the questionnaire alive and still collecting trend reports. So that's a difficult one for us, but let's not just have one questionnaire and let it go. Also, it has to be controllable. It has to be something controllable and actionable when it's at store level. And I think a lot of us know this, but too often we see that store reporting down to store level for a mystery shopping program includes things that are not actionable by the store manager. So they're getting marked down for things that they can't control. For example, how modern was the store? Well, many store managers can't control that. Also, however, those unactionable items can be reported, but they should not be reported at store level if they're not able to be changed by the store manager. And it's one that we have to be very careful of, and it causes a lot of frustration for store managers. Now, another characteristic of a well set up questionnaire is that the scores have to be meaningful. We've seen this both, and I've seen this with other people that I talk to through conferences and around the mystery shopping world, is that clients like to mix things up. So, for example, there might be 4 or 5 subtotals in a mystery shopping questionnaire, and they'll say, well, it looks like, and you look at the second point here, the combination of our service, complaints, and efficiency, the targets increased by 2%. That number means nothing. Often people are putting totals and summaries on numbers that are a whole lot of things all mixed together that don't really mean anything to anybody. It's okay to say our overall score has increased 2%, or our satisfaction has increased 2%, or our cleanliness has increased 2%. But sometimes the scores get mixed all together and it combines a whole lot of different factors that you can't just say this thing or this concept has increased 2% or 5%. So those numeric values must hold a concept to them. Now, the other thing is that obviously measure just the important things. Again, we see time and time again, clients are asking to measure things that are not important to the customer. And some companies around Asia Pacific I know do this, but survey the customers before creating a mystery shopping program. It's difficult because the clients often don't want to spend the money, but find out what's going on in the customer's mind, find out what's important to them, and then ask the questions. For example, we've got a client that asks about security guard uniforms. Now, that's not important to the customer, but they continue to ask the question because, again, they're trying to fit as many questions as they can into a questionnaire, because another guy from another department who's responsible for the security guards wants to know if they're wearing their uniform. That's all well and good, but it starts to pull away from the purpose of the questionnaire, which in this case is about understanding the service provided in the facility. So the other thing is, getting close to the end of these setup areas, is unrealistic benchmarks. We see clients, and again, many of you say the same thing to me. They set a benchmark of, say, 80%. Then they say, we're going to move it to 90% because everyone's achieved benchmark. And then they start saying, we're going to move from 90% to 92%. And it starts to really put pressure on, I think, us and the questionnaire, because stores are going to start scratching and fighting and coming back with queries to try to get these extra 1 or 2%, because the client keeps driving the benchmarks higher and higher and higher and higher. Often it's not a case of just changing the benchmark. Sometimes what's happening behind that is that they should perhaps be looking at the questionnaire itself and whether it should be changing, rather than just increasing the benchmark. Or it says to me, it's a time to change the weighting of the questions and the weighting of the scores. So just keep in mind that one, because it does create problems when you start making small changes to the benchmarks, and it starts to create a negative attitude to the mystery shopping by the stores themselves. And we don't want that negative attitude, because that comes back to us. So sometimes for the clients, enough is enough with these benchmarks. So I would also say here, focus on the system, not the individual. We have to be careful, and I think most of us know this, but so many of these questionnaires are trying to focus in on the person themselves, and I want to know who served and who didn't serve. Overall mystery shopping, the greatest strength is you find out what systemic problems are going on in the network and where you can narrow them down to. Getting down to individual people, I don't think many of us like that, but we have to be careful of it, because many of the clients do. Especially when they say, I want you to shop on Wednesday morning because I know Mary is working on Wednesday morning. The other thing is, the trend is your friend. For restricted budgets with low frequencies, we really have to fight often with our clients, but not fight in a sense of antagonism or anger, but more a case of arguing the point to say, well, okay, if you've got restricted budget and you've got low frequency, perhaps let's go with less questions with higher frequency if removing questions can reduce the price. And sometimes it can, because our shoppers, we know that the longer the questionnaire, the more money they want. So if we can reduce questions and increase the frequency, that could help us. But we need to get obviously we need to get as many rounds per year done as possible to keep the trends going. This is still a surprise to many people in the industry that so many mystery shopping companies still don't use skip logics in their questionnaires. So skip logic is if question 3 equals no, for example, then jump straight to question 15. What we're seeing with still a lot of questionnaires is that then, if in this example, if question 3 equals no, then question 4, in the shopper guidelines, it says if question 3 was no, then put not applicable. For question 4, it will say if question 3 was no, put not applicable. Question 5, if question 3 was no, put not applicable, and so on to question 15. Those things really overload the shoppers, and they just increase queries from the stores. So it slows the shoppers down, creates too much work, creates mistakes. It's all bad. There's nothing good about that scenario. So if you don't have the skip logics, and a lot of you still don't, you've just got to build them in. It's kind of almost a non-negotiable. You're going to save money, a lot of money in the long run. So we're going to talk now about these 17 traps of mystery shopping. So I'm going to jump out of presentation mode for a moment and just check on questions, and we're all good. So just with presentation mode, just with the traps, I think there are 17 of them, and you may think there are more, but let's just touch these 17, and maybe you've come across some of them yourself. We see, number one, there are too many questions being asked all at once, being asked more than once. So we're seeing questions about, for example, satisfaction being asked at the end of every section of a customer interaction. So a shopper might answer 2 or 3 questions, and then they're asked, what was your satisfaction about this? Then a few more questions, what was your satisfaction about this? What was your satisfaction about this? Number one, I don't think those questions are really relevant. And overall, what's irrelevant is their satisfaction at the end of the questionnaire. But what it does is it starts to really annoy the shoppers, and we don't want annoyed shoppers, although I know they annoy us, but we don't want annoyed shoppers because it starts to cost us money again. And they start to make queries, and we have negative phone calls, and it's, again, not good. So we've got to be careful of questions that keep repeating themselves. And we're seeing this just way too much. So stop the repetition, stop repeating. I would also say ask only one question. What that means is not only one question in the questionnaire, but we see still a basic beginner's error almost, joining statements in questionnaires. For example, like the bottom, was the staff member wearing the uniform and was it clean? Now, 95% of you here will know that that's not a great question, because what happens if the uniform was clean and it wasn't the right uniform, or it wasn't a uniform but it was clean, or it was a uniform and it was dirty? How does the shopper answer the question? Often that's then dealt with in the guidelines, and there's a whole lot of rules around how the shopper should answer it. It's just work. Break it up into 2 questions. Was the uniform being worn, and was it clean? It's an obvious one, and that's why it's probably right up the top of the top here. Small scales. We have to be careful, and the clients tend to like scales of 1 to 10. So please rate this on a scale of 1 to 10. The problem with 1 to 10 is it's very unclear what the difference is between, say, a 6 and a 7. And it's very unclear what it is between, say, an 8 and a 9, or a 2 and a 3. We much prefer scales of 1 to 5, or even 1 to 4, because scale of 1 to 5 asks for someone to say, oh, number 3, put it in the middle. Scale of 1 to 4 forces someone to make a decision. 1 and 2, bad. 3 and 4, good. So I'd encourage you to shrink your scales. Better still, have 1s and 0s. have a yes or a no. Structure your questions in a way that just has yes and no's if possible. If it means a few more questions, then fine. But yes, no questions, we find in talking to more and more practitioners, yes, no questions are a sign of a good questionnaire. So the scales tend to be a little bit lazy. Also avoid the negative. For example, was the staff member untidy? It's difficult to score these questions because the scoring is almost reversed. And it's also confusing for the shoppers because most questions are positive in the positive light, and then you have one in the negative light. And this is if you have a question like "Was the staff member untidy?" with the negative in the question, staff shoppers can accidentally tick that because they read that as being "Was the staff member tidy?" So you can get false answers as well because they're so used to going into positive question mode. So shoppers also equate a tick with a good job, and we all do in society. If it's a tick, we say that's good, but here a tick would be a negative. So it's very confusing to everybody. So avoid negative questions. Also avoid leading questions. So don't lead the shopper along like you lead a dog down the street. Don't set up the answer in the question, is what we're saying. So, for example, we always try to ensure staff are well presented. Was the staff member wearing the full uniform? Well, a few things happen here is number one, it gives the shopper an idea as to what the correct answer is. Number two, it starts to just give us a little bit of a bias in there because they start to feel sympathy for the staff member because they're understanding, well, they should have done that. She was a nice person. I'll and we know they're really trying because it says they're trying, so I'll tick that as okay. So remove these leading questions from the questionnaires. Okay, also remove ambiguity. Ambiguity being I know there are people here with different English skills, so ambiguity being remove unclear questions. So we have to be very, very precise of these positive questions. For example, clean. What does clean mean? I've got one client who says clean, it's just no dust. And I've got another client who says clean means I don't want to see a single weed in the garden. I don't want to see one single fingerprint on the windows. Everything must be perfect. So we have to be very clear to the shoppers of what they mean by clean. For example, another one, was the poster in good condition? Well, what happens if it's faded a little bit by the light? What happens if a kid has come and put the pen on it? What happens if the corner's a little bit turned up? What if it's a little bit crooked? These types of we have to be very, very clear for the shoppers so they can understand what's going on. Ticketing is another one. What was the ticketing on the shelf clear? Are they talking about the font, the size, the position of the ticket, whether it was consistent with the other ones, whether it was even there at all? So we have to be very clear here as to what these terms mean because they can mean different things. Okay, no entrapment. I just like an excuse to look at Catherine Zeta-Jones. Sorry, but look, like in the movie Entrapment, Catherine Zeta-Jones was a law enforcement agent pretending to befriend Sean Connery, who was a thief, a diamond thief, and she was trying to get him to rob a certain store with a view to once he robs it that he would be arrested. So basically the premise of the story, the idea is setting people up to fail or to get caught. Now, we don't want to set staff up for failure, and in fact, within the MSPA ethics guidelines, it's not really something we should be doing, and we should have realistic scenarios. So the scenarios shouldn't be things that will trap the staff. For example, asking tricky questions that we know the staff would not know the answer to, just to trick them into giving a wrong answer. I've seen some clients try to ask these questions, and it's really not fair on the staff, and it's not fair on the shopper because usually that will mean the shopper has to go and do something unnatural to what any other individual would be doing or any other customer. Okay, so now number 8, we have to balance the frequency of the reports. This one's tricky because often we see infrequent shops, and this is a trap not of the questionnaire construction, but what you do with it. Shops being done, say, 6 monthly, and then reporting down to store level and using it for, say, for for bonuses and things like that, incentive programs. Now, we all know that you can get one bad shop in 6 months. If this client does not have budget to go more frequently than, say, 6 monthly, then those shops are still okay, but at a system-wide level. So if they've got 200 stores, you've collected data on 200 stores from mystery shops, you can get a good idea of what's happening in the system generally, but it's not really valid to go down. It's not valid to go down to individual store level and single out a staff member who served someone once in that 6 month period. So frequent shops like monthly are more appropriate for store level reporting, and if they need to have staff names. Keep in mind also on staff names in the MSPA ethics guidelines, it's not permitted to collect staff names when you're mystery shopping competitors. So just keep that one in mind as well. But collecting staff names for the client's staff is okay. But only do that really when you're shopping more than, let's say, monthly, but much more frequently than 6 monthly. I like to say this one to our clients: less is more. Don't ask too many questions. Again, they love to ask questions. We want to ask all these questions and we've paid the money, so you keep quiet, Stephen. We're going to ask as many questions as we want. Well, that's fine, but the shoppers are going to screw it up. They can only do 30 to 35 questions, I think, and depending on the type of question, that's already stretching it. And I really believe that a person doing a mystery shop, and I don't know if I've done probably 300 or 500 in my life, maybe more. You can't really remember more than one name, one time measurement, and one physical attribute, like one physical poster. You can remember things like the interaction. You can remember things like, did they upsell, cross sell, close the sale? You can remember those things. Humans are great at recalling human interactions, but when it comes to remembering, you want me to remember a time measurement, and you want me to remember a name, and you want to remember a poster, and you want me to remember the second person's name and how long that person took to serve me, and also what brochure was at the counter and who served me at the cash register. I mean, it's just overload. I can't do it. It's too hard for me. So I don't know how our shoppers are going to do these things. Now, unfortunately, a lot of questionnaires are overloading shoppers, and then there are queries coming back, and then it's not good for the industry. And at an MSPA level, then we have clients just leaving mystery shopping altogether, saying, it didn't work for me, it just wasn't accurate. Well, no wonder why, because you are overloading the shopper. And some of them, we've seen them with over 100 questions. It's ridiculous. Often we know that it's not a good thing. It's just because the client insists and they say either do the questions or don't do the work. And sometimes it is best to walk away from that work, which we have done, and we know a lot of the MSPA members have done as well. Just said, I'm not doing it. It's going to wreck my brand name and annoy my staff and my shoppers to the point where they go crazy. So it's not worth it. Number 10, we've got 7 more after this one. Use normal scenarios. There's a normal way that people act in a store. Just like an apple falls from a tree a certain way. I mean, an apple falls from a tree, the normal thing is for the apple to fall from the tree. In mystery shopping, a shopper will normally walk in and ask a certain thing a certain way. Don't ask for ridiculous scenarios. And I've seen from other members who have told me horror stories of clients who really ask for the exotic new product to be mystery shopped. Sometimes the product hasn't even been released into the stores yet. They just want to find out how that product's going to test, and some ridiculous starting point they come from. It doesn't make sense. It's not normal for the stores. It exposes the shopper. The store isn't given a chance to perform at its best. They'll get bad results. They'll complain. They'll say this thing is terrible, and it will. And look, at the end of the day, you will end up probably losing the client. Measure what the majority of the transactions. Let's say 90% of the transactions are the same. That's where you make your money, probably. So that's where it should be measured. Now, some of you may disagree with that, but be very, very careful at the very least about non-normal scenarios. Number 11, stay in the expertise. The shopper is not a retail expert. They are simply a person who is recording information. Nothing more, nothing less for a straight mystery shop. Sometimes we do ask them to do more, but don't go asking them questions like, would you employ this server? Or where would you put the aisle? Or sometimes the shoppers actually, when there's too much opportunity for text in the questionnaire, they'll start volunteering their expertise to say the shelf is in the wrong spot or the counter should be moved. Let's get the shoppers to stay within their expertise. Also, I hope you're all doing well. It's half an hour. I'm going to talk for another probably 20 minutes, maybe hopefully less for your sakes. And I hope this is working for you. Number 12, avoid measurements. Now, what do you mean avoid measurements? That's what we do. Well, avoid measurements that overload the shoppers. Sometimes shoppers are being asked to collect information that the store system is already collecting. For example, it might be asking for the length of a transaction. They might be asking for information about how long the shopper was in the store, and often that can be collected. There's a lot of information that can already be collected in store that does not need to be collected in the mystery shops. So just be aware of measurements that are already being collected that they then ask you to collect. Number 13 is important, I think. Don't keep score. Well, we should, but the shoppers shouldn't. If the shoppers score the questionnaires, you're going to get like the photo. Did this happen? Yes. Please give a score between 1 and 5. And someone will say this, and someone will say it's a 1, someone will say it's a 2, someone will say it's a 3 for exactly the same thing. It encourages inconsistency and bias. If you want the shopper's subjective view, then the way to deal with it is to simply put a scale in. What did you think on a scale of 1 to 5? And then you, the mystery shopping company, assign the score to each of those answers automatically in the system. Don't let the shopper score and don't let them think they are scoring. Some questionnaires also, they go as far as to say, and you've probably seen these as well. If question 2 is yes, then score 2 points. If question 2 is maybe, then score 1 point. Don't let the shopper do the scoring. They'll put the wrong number down. We know shoppers are great at making errors because they're collecting a lot of information. Just ask them to tick a box as to what happened, and you need to do the scoring in the background yourself. On that issue, I think we should ban the not applicable question. I've seen questionnaires where if question 1 equals yes, then go to question 2, and then it'll say yes, no, maybe, not applicable. Not applicable is I think it's just lazy. And it's an easy exit or an out for the shopper. It just means the question isn't constructed properly. So have a think about your not applicable answers. That they are a great cause of problem for a lot of the practitioners around Asia Pacific. Number 15, use the address listing. This one's a big one. The client will give you a listing of all their sites, and you will load them into your system. Then those site listings usually contain, or they should contain, information as to what facilities are in that site. For example, in shopping centres, some restaurants are in an isolated store on their own. Some are in a kiosk in the middle of a food hall. The ones that are standing on their own, freestanding, have a bathroom. The ones in the kiosk do not. Now, the question often comes up in the mystery shopping questionnaire. What was the condition of the bathroom? Or it might be 3 or 4 questions. And the store in the kiosk doesn't have a bathroom. So the store manager is not responsible. That question should not be in that questionnaire for the kiosk. And if it is, it should probably not be scored. But it's perfectly appropriate and applicable for someone in a in a standalone store with a bathroom. Don't ask the shopper to do this because the shopper will get it wrong, or even if the shopper goes to the bathroom, it's not the bathroom controlled by the store manager. So here, this address listing should tell you whether the kiosk has a bathroom or not, or whether the site has a bathroom or not. And if it does not have a bathroom, that question should not appear for the shopper to answer at all. Remove the opportunity for the shopper to make a mistake and remove the scoring for that question from the store. That's a tricky issue, but removing the scoring, but it's not fair for the store manager. But certainly don't let the shopper make the decision. And don't say in the guidelines, if this is a kiosk, do not answer this question, because the shopper will get it wrong. They will definitely get it wrong. So get your address listing to include whether, in this case, bathroom, whether that site has a bathroom. If it does have a bathroom, then ask the questions about bathrooms. That's a real big one. And if you get that right, or if you get it wrong, all you do is get queries. The person with the kiosk manager will say, this mystery shopping company, they're all idiots, they're morons, they don't know what they're doing. They've said I've got a bathroom. The bathroom's 100 meters away. It's not my bathroom. I've got nothing to do with it. They're idiots. We shouldn't do this anymore. And as you all know, many franchise managers especially are looking for any excuse not to do mystery shopping because they don't want to pay for it and they don't want to be exposed. I would also, number 16, two more, second last one, remove similar answers. Sometimes we see, like this one that's crossed out, was the staff member A, polite, B, friendly, C, warm? They all sound the same. They're all very imprecise, and they're all asking the same thing. So the questions should be perhaps separated and made more clearly, but don't group things together like that. It's too similar, confuses the shopper, and the shopper says, yeah, they were all of these things. So I'd like you to think about that one when you're doing questionnaires. The last one, last one of these issues is reduce the free text. In some cases and some mystery shopping questionnaires, they are completely free text, and I understand that. The majority of them, however, are not. They are yes, no answers. The temptation, especially for clients, is to have free text after every question. They love free text, and I understand that. But it does create inconsistencies. It creates queries, longer quality control because the quality controllers are reading. It takes longer for the shopper to complete, and the shoppers will usually create a story just to fulfill the requirements. And often the text will be similar between one question and another. So the temptation for the clients is to have as much free text as possible. We would suggest less free text fields in the questionnaire, but where they are used, and they should be used, to make sure those stories with the free text are very complete and very thorough. You only have to just write a story once or twice about a visit, and it's going to capture everything you need to capture. And you're going to save money because you'll save on quality control and errors. So we're moving towards the end. We've gone 40 minutes in, and I'm just a couple more slides on the shopper guidelines. Now, before I forget, at the end of this webinar, there is a small survey. I would really appreciate if you could fill in the survey, because this is the first time MSPA has done this. We want to know whether we should keep doing it or whether we should not, or do something else. So really appreciate it. There are only 3 or 4 questions on a scale of 1 to 4, of course. So shopper guidelines, there aren't as many of these, but be careful of the length of the guidelines you're giving your shoppers. If the guidelines are too long, it's a sign that the questionnaire is not clear. It's a sign that the questionnaire needs more work. Now, we had those previous examples where I said that they would have to have the guidelines explain these questions. Make the question clear, and you should not need guidelines. So I say, they say where there's smoke, there's fire. Long guidelines equals bad questionnaire, I think. Often the guidelines are including things that they do not need, and I'll just cover that now. Firstly, I see guidelines where there's a guideline for every question. You don't need a guideline for every question. For example, were all the lights on? Well, either yes or no. You don't need a guideline to say this means that all the lights were on and no lights were off. We know that the shoppers are not stupid, and you start to create this forest of words that the shoppers just can't get through, and they won't be reading the things that are really, really important. For example, the definition of clean, or for example, the definition of what does a uniform look like. So often in the guidelines, there's just too much. And then for the shopper, it's just too many rules. It's like you can do this, you can't do this, you can do this, you can't do this, and they don't know which way to go. Keep it very simple, crisp, clean questions. Also, we see unnecessary guidelines. I don't know where I saw this photo, but if you're moving house, don't pack a dog and a cat in the same box. And I mean, that's obvious. You don't need instruction for that. So some questions, as I mentioned, should be self-explanatory and don't need a guideline. And the important guidelines lose focus. Now, again, for example, I've seen so many questionnaires where they say, was the bathroom clean? And then they will show a photo of a perfectly clean bathroom. Well, we know what a clean bathroom looks like. Perhaps in this case, they might be saying it can't have a single piece of paper on the floor, or it can't have any marks on the mirrors, or there can't be any soap dripping on the floor. Those types of things are valid guidelines if it's that precise. But not just a photo of a bathroom. It just creates, again, this forest of words and photos. Another one is, was the garbage bin empty? And they show a photo of an empty garbage bin. We know what an empty garbage bin looks like. Get that out of the guidelines. It's ridiculous. Okay, let's be consistent with the questionnaire. Obvious. Make sure the guideline refers to the questionnaire. But sometimes this doesn't happen. For example, here's a live example, not one of ours, but this is from a client that we took on. The guideline said take 2 photos, and the questionnaire asked for 1 photo. Now, again, the shoppers get confused. They make phone calls. This is a basic error, and they're easy to make. I understand that. And we've probably made these types of errors ourselves. But there's nothing more important than getting someone else to read these guidelines and make sure they're consistent with the questionnaires. The length of the guidelines, I've seen shopper guidelines well over 40 pages. Look, the shoppers are only getting paid $5, $10, $15 for the whole assignment to go out there, read all this stuff, put the results in, maybe a query from the quality controllers. It's a lot of work for not much money. And then we expect them to read 40 pages. Well, they're not going to read it. And it's only going to create more queries for you on the back end of it. So we've gone 45 minutes in. I'm pretty much done. I think, again, back to the beginning, this stuff that we've discussed is really the heart of mystery shopping. I don't think there's much more important than creating a good questionnaire and then following on from that, the guidelines. Reporting systems, yeah, okay. There's the old saying, a report's as good as the data coming in. If there's crap coming in, there's crap coming out. So this questionnaire is what's going to drive that for us. Just next, remember again, there's a survey. I'm going to jump out of here for 1 minute and just see if anyone's got any more questions. I've got some questions here. 30 to 30. One question here is that 30 to 35 questions are great. However, sometimes it's the clients who ask us to make more questions. Now, I understand that, and we've had clients that started with 60 questions, and one of these clients we got down from 60 questions down to 12. They've actually down to 9, and then now they've gone back up to about 12 questions. So I think the secret with this, and we found, was to show them the trend analysis over time to say, look, your questions 1 to 17, 67, 70 to 80, they're all scoring every time the same result, every time 90% or 95%. They never change. We would suggest taking those questions out. And they'll say, why? I like to know. Well, nothing's changing, and it's overloading the shoppers. You know that stuff's good. Leave it out and let the shoppers focus on these areas that you're scoring poorly on. For example, closing the sale. And this is a live example. Closing the sale is important to you, isn't it? It's a big issue. Well, yes, it is. Well, let's get the shoppers to focus on that as well. And that actually worked for us a couple of times. That's actually worked. Sometimes we fail and we fail miserably, and the shopper says, no, get lost, measure what I've asked you to measure. So I do get that question, but keep trying, and show with historical data. The historical data does work. So any other questions, just down the line for a minute. It's great we've had over 40 people joining today. If you have any other questions or any comments you'd like to make, I'll stay online for another minute or two. And I again would ask you to fill in the survey. Now, feel free to contact me directly as well. You will be receiving a recorded version of this. Again, please be protective of it. It is the MSPA's, and you've paid for this through your membership. So for someone who has not paid it, well, as far as I'm concerned, they don't watch it. You paid through good money at the membership with your membership, and let's keep it that way. So if you've got any other questions, I'll stay on for another minute. You can send me questions directly on your own as well. No questions? Okay. We will end the webinar. We've finished, we've done 50 minutes, which for a 1-hour webinar is enough. Thank you, everyone, very, very much. I really appreciate your attendance. We're thrilled with the numbers. I mean, we've just got great numbers. To get 50 people, it's awesome. It looks like free works, doesn't it? And I'll talk to you. We'll be continuing these webinars, and I'll talk to you again shortly, hopefully within the next month or two. Thanks once again. I'll end the webinar now. And don't forget the survey. Thank you very much.